here a minute early would be great. So if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we're gonna kind of pop into business right away, and then we'll go back and grab the other stuff, because we only have Chris for a half hour. I know, Chris, that there was a couple comments on the manufactured home. In section 220-9S, number
Yes.
3. Mike was saying something about just deleting the part about below the frost line because it's covered in building code.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's, most of the manufactured homes don't do extended, they do a shallow frost free. So if we just cut it off after on a full perimeter foundation, then I think that would cover it.
Doesn't a full perimeter, doesn't a foundation have to be below the frost line?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, there's ways that you can do it without it.
Okay. But
So,
to be clear, and I assume this is what the town wants, we want trailers on foundations that look like they're permanent installations, not actual trailers, right?
I say correct to that.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
if, why would you not cut it off, maybe the part you talked about in accordance with the manufacturer's spec? I thought you were just cutting that part off.
so we would cut it off after with concrete or concrete block foundation walls or perimeter foundation, whichever is easiest. Extending below the frost line, we'd cut off because sometimes we don't need to do that. And then in accordance with manufacturer's specs, that's just building code verbatim. So.
It's interesting that somebody said permanent. When I read this, I suggest that we put in permanent between perimeter and foundation. So it clarifies that we're talking about permanent foundation.
A full perimeter foundation.
No, perimeter, permanent foundation, either place, but that's what we're after, is a permanent foundation. Why don't we say it?
Or would concrete or concrete block cover off on permanent? It's pretty permanent. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty substantial.
Nothing's ever.
Never
100%
been permanent,
so-
right? But block or concrete would be substantial.
Well, even those you can get out. Take some effort.
Yeah. I got one coming out this week.
Anything else on manufactured homes?
So how will that read then?
My recommendation would be a manufactured home located outside of a manufactured home park shall be sited or shall sit on a full perimeter foundation with concrete or concrete block foundation walls.
Do you want the in accordance with the
No.
manufacturer's specifications?
Because that's building code.
Yep.
And adding the word
And
permanent
there's
wouldn't
somewhere,
change anything.
correct, and there's somewhere manufacturing instructions is no, it would be.
So we'll just leave it with building code.
I had one other suggestion on number 2, second line, to again clarify intent. I suggest we put in no less than 720 heated square feet of or conditioned square feet of living area. So you're clarifying you want this living area to be habitable.
Well, in conjunction with that, the board is considering not having a minimum size.
So you wouldn't
So-
have that anyway, if that's.
What happens if we decide we're not gonna have a minimum size?
And this would have to be, this probably would come after that, you know, I mean,
Just because the way we're lined up for stuff.
so
this
we would know
So in other words,
for,
if we pass a no minimum size, we're gonna modify this to say the same thing.
you probably would remove item 2, right?
Yeah, entirely,
Right.
strike it.
In its entirety.
No reference to size at all.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, so I looked up what minimum sizes for trailer from manufactured homes are, and it's 720 would be pretty low, I think. And I left it that way because you haven't made a decision on minimum house size. I'm not certain what you want to do. There may be differences between a tiny house and a tiny trailer. Well, you may want to allow somebody to have a 400 square foot house that's built like a house. Dropping a 400 square foot trailer somewhere might be different. It's something I think you should consider before you take action on it.
I think that's a great point. I mean, if you had a camping trailer and you put it on a block foundation, that.
Not,
My understanding is that these manufactured homes that we're talking about here are not trailers.
correct.
Okay, so how do you differentiate between, and I'm gonna use the word trailer, like a camping trailer that they pull in, put on blocks, take the axle off?
One is licensed by New York State Department of State, the other one is licensed by New York State Department of Motor Vehicles.
So
Get enough.
do we have that? Do we need to have that verbiage in here somewhere? No.
A manufactured home, by definition, under state law, is as such licensed by New York State Department of State. So like, when I look at it, there's two options. One is a manufactured home or a modular home. Anything else is declared a stick built.
Okay, good.
So you can't just take a camping trailer and put it on your land.
Yeah,
No good, can't.
But-
That's only for temporary use.
But Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. The definition of manufactured home includes what we all traditionally think of as a trailer, doesn't it? You know, the long rectangle with a trailer hitch at the front of it.
Yes, it does. You're correct.
but New York State
But I can't say-
defines that differently than,
No, no.
my concern would be,
We call them manufactured homes.
right,
That's a manufactured
Not
home.
called
right.
What I'm taking your concern to be is like
an RV.
the camper I got
Correct.
stored. You know, I pull my camper onto a
Right.
site. You can't do that.
Good,
Manufactured homes are licensed as such that DOS goes through, does all the inspections. They're manufactured in a controlled setting and then placed on the site.
so trailer hitch on the front of it doesn't really matter at all, it really matters by the definition of manufactured home.
Yep.
So then I guess if we come to 0, we would strike number 2 then, as long as we're comfortable with that. And Chris, we don't. will we need to-
Exactly.
Will we need to amend that? I mean, we'll amend this, but we're trying to set a public hearing on this, correct?
We haven't set up.
Yes,
But we should.
But you can-
Well,
I think you should present it. Go ahead.
It could be, the public hearing would be set, could be set in December,
Right,
and at that meeting, we should have a decision
right,
on the trailer, so if necessary. This is in front of us to set a public hearing. If we go to 0, if we eliminate any signs, then we,
right,
on the floor, strike number 2.
right,
It gets advertised for the public hearing. I
right,
think
so then we're okay with,
That's
because
easy enough.
I'd like to keep pushing this forward, you
Yep,
know,
I think
move
we're
it along.
good. I don't see it delay. I don't see it delay.
Anything else on manufactured? How about bisected lots or RLD lot coverage calculation?
First question I have is, how did this make it to the top of the list when we have so many other important things to be talking about? I gotta believe that in the whole town of Canandaigua, there can't be one remaining lot that this addresses. And if there is, we're gonna spend all this time with all these people addressing one opportunity, if there is one. So I think what is more appropriate, and I'm kind of glad this was brought up, we ought to use this to talk about the size of accessory structures on the lake side. As opposed to whether somebody wants to build a home on the lakeside. I don't think there's any lots available like that in the town anyways, but the first question is, how does this make it to the top of the list? I mean, we've got so many other more important things to talk about.
I don't think it was priority list, it was
Okay.
just a list,
Okay,
so it's not prioritized.
well, then we ought to be talking about form-based code and some of the other things that are more important, to talk about economic development in our community instead of this.
Well,
No, those aren't
we-
really.
all are
Economic
important
development
issues
is
that we can
really-
discuss at any time, so, but what we have in front of us is the bisected lot. Is there any comments?
I'd like somebody to
Question.
give a specific example, like what this means.
I can't answer that because I had no part in this.
When does it come to us?
Oh,
because of the
sure.
zoning
At this
board?
point, I would
No.
defer to
Because
other
you have
staff.
to
The ECB.
interpret it, so.
ECB, this came from through E ECB.
I have a question. Is the idea only new development or when we get an application, when someone wants to tear down the existing house and build a new house?
I would say tear down as well.
Because that's where we get a lot of requests to have a higher lot coverage. Is when they're rebuilding. Pretty much
Higher
every
than
time.
what is existing.
Higher than what is existing and higher than what's allowed. That's typically where we get that, is when someone tears down a house and rebuilds it.
This one specifically deals with people that have a lot on the lakeside as well as a lot on the upland side.
Yeah.
It's the same lot.
When you have a lot that has County Road 16 going through it,
Bisected
or Sandy Beach or Poplar Beach or what have you, whenever there's an
But-
RLD lot with a street going through. But that was what I was wondering.
I think we need to have that. I think tearing down is important to address.
That way too.
Well, if they're new development,
Yeah,
yeah, that was
Lots on the
something.
other side of this,
Some of them.
Yeah.
Or is it just the golf course?
that's, we're always getting zoning variance requests for those houses as well.
Was that, you're talking country club area and then Poplar and Sandy, that area around there.
And as John said, in Westlake Road,
Westlake
there are a
Road.
lot of bisected lots.
Well, I mean, in the verbiage that's in here, a lot divided by a street and a new development is proposed. Is a new development also tearing down the existing structure and building a new one? That seems to be new development to me.
Absolutely.
We would
Take the
call
word
it-
new out.
I don't know.
Development should
That
be-
should be included. Tear down rebuild should be considered new development.
Yes.
Yeah,
And my thought was, when I was drafting this, was also if you're gonna put a new accessory structure, that's new development.
Or a
An
garage.
expansion is also new development.
Okay.
Do we need to include the word new?
That's what I said.
Yes, redundant, just to say new development,
Yeah,
just like
right,
just
but all
development.
that stuff is development.
I think
It's not new.
5 years from now, if someone else is reviewing this, we just want to make sure everyone who reviews this understands what it means.
So you're saying remove the word new?
New,
Yeah, with that,
just any development.
There's a reason I put it there and now I'm kind of blanking.
Why do we need this? I haven't heard an answer. to that.
Oh,
Why do we need this?
It does occur. We
Where?
see on Westlake Road, you got a small lot on the lake, or a small part of the lot on the lake. And you've got this balance of the lot going up the hill, nothing on it, all trees, and they use that area.
To calculate.
Calculate
It's per percentage of lot coverage.
and the result is that
Yeah.
they cram as much as they
So it's-
possibly
it's-
can on the lakeside lot, leaving no
We've
room
seen
for
it.
stormwater
You've
management.
seen it
Yeah,
half a dozen times at least, and they always wanna, load up near the lake because they have all this
right.
empty land up top.
What's wrong with that?
Doesn't leave any room for stormwater management. And everybody knows, and you may disagree, but the riparian zone, the area along the lake shore and up, several, whatever it is, 20, 30 feet, whatever the definition is the most critical around the lake. Why do we want to continue to jam it full of structures?
Well, as far as I know, the riparian part of the lake, and particularly the break walls now, are all to be made of natural material. They can't be made of concrete.
Riparian zone is much larger than the riprap area.
Yeah, but so most of the contamination from our lake is coming down the hill. And if they have this much land on the hillside, what do we care?
Well, I care. As I said, I know you don't agree,
Yes.
but I care.
Why?
Could be a matter of
I'm not
aesthetics
gonna spend
too.
an hour of this meeting explaining it to you, but I can give you some
Because why
resources.
wouldn't we want to spend an hour? If it takes an hour to talk about it, why wouldn't we want to spend that hour?
Tim, you wanna help with this one? Explaining why this is important. Or maybe if we have some resources we can share with John to help him understand why the ECB brought this.
ECB brought this because we have seen people cram things along the lakeside. And it makes it very difficult for the planning board, because they're the ones that will address the stormwater issue. And we saw a person, she put a pool, she put a patio, she put all sorts of stuff on a small lakeside parcel when she had 19 acres of land. And that was never going to trip over any sort of stoppage, any sort of, you can't do this.
And when the,
And there's more, there's Fallbrook and Sandy Beach, we've seen people.
What is that last part right there? I didn't hear that.
Fallbrook and Sandy Beach, we've seen this as well.
and when you have, if you spread the development out, so some of this on the non-lakeside portion of the lot, there's more space for the rainwater to infiltrate into the ground rather than all of it just shedding into the lake on the lakeside portion, when there's not enough land around the developed area of that lot for the water to sink into the ground the way it
Worried
should
about
before
rainwater
it hits
getting into the lake.
Runoff from rain getting into the lake.
Carrying materials into the lake. I see no problem. with it.
I see no problem with this either. Jared, you see a problem?
Same.
So I think we're just arguing circular. So if there's anything,
Not arguing, they're discussing.
okay, well, we're arguing about discussing, but does anyone see anything in this ordinance that you would like to change or sentence structure that you would like to see different?
just the question on whether the word
Oh.
new is necessary.
Tear downs.
I remembered I would suggest we leave the word new in. Because leaving it out would create a ton of non-conforming lots. If we leave the word new in, everybody's conforming until they go to propose something new. Which can have impact on financing when you go to get a loan from a bank.
So to that point, Chris, if we have a non-conforming structure now, and a person wants to tear it down and install a new home there, can they make it the same size as the existing non-conforming structure?
It'll depend on the area of the lakeside portion of the lot. The calculations would be done when they come in with a proposal, kind of just the same as we do it now, but now we would be looking at the area of the lakeside portion of the lot separately from the other portion of the lot when this comes into play.
So if a person wants to go and buy a house that's on the lakeside portion of the road, they want to tear it down and build a new house to accommodate their family needs. If the house that was there is a non-conforming existing structure, we're gonna say that they no longer can build to that same size house, they gotta adhere to this?
Well, that would be the current law, so I would say yes.
No, the current law allows you to do it as long as you don't build larger than the existing structure.
Not true. Some existing structures are non-conforming. And sometimes some existing structures today in the RLD are non-conforming. And sometimes people are proposing something that doesn't meet code.
There's a house going up now on Westlake Road that is a non-conforming structure to this. That is tearing down a house and building a new one. And I assume it's to the same size as the one that's existing. So now what we're saying potentially is that if someone buys a home on the lakeside portion of a lot,
They would be buying the whole lot.
yeah, but they're building on a lakeside portion of a lot and a house is there already. They can't tear it down and build a house to the same size as the existing?
Hence, we'd have to do the calculations. But we always do the calculations.
That's the one that's,
That potential exists.
That
Yes.
calculation is the same calculation, it doesn't change. If the house is non-conforming, and they
Based on what?
purchase it,
So
Non-conforming.
you have to calculate what the lot coverage
He
is
said
on something.
existing homes will not be non-conforming.
that's what I'm asking. If an existing house is non-conforming and they want to tear it down and build a new home, they're not gonna be allowed to do that.
They should
Will be
conform
allowed.
to the current law. That's what I'm saying.
It's not saying they won't be allowed to tear it down and build a new one.
That is very,
It's saying that they would need to conform to the requirements.
if they gotta conform to this and the existing house doesn't, we better make a lot of buyers that are coming to Canandaigua to buy a home on the lakeside aware of it.
Well, everyone buying a home in the lakeside, in the RLD in Canandaigua should check the code before they do it. They shouldn't make
Before they tear
assumptions
something
about
down,
what
right.
they can and cannot do. And we do get calls often for people who want to buy a home in the town of Canandaigua. They call our office, my office, and they talk to us about what's allowed, what's not allowed, or what are the zoning restrictions. I mean, we get calls like that all the time.
So when you're talking about, John, just on the lakeside, just north of Butler Road,
Yes.
that lot is entirely on the lakeside. though, isn't
I
it?
believe they have land on the other
No, they have.
side, don't they?
No, it's only on that one side, so this doesn't really apply.
But there could be, the
They're,
ones we're
they're
talking,
building,
There,
the ones we're talking about down on, by the golf course, Fallbrook, the ones on Sandy Beach.
well,
the
no,
ones
I'm
on
just
Butler.
speaking to the Japanese.
so as far as lots that this would go towards, it's anything south of Fallbrook. All Fallbrook is just lakeside. They don't have any.
That's not true. They have a road intersecting their lots and most of them park on the other side.
But that is actually most of the lots, except for the last few. It's owned by the golf course. For a lot of them.
That's true.
As far as other ones on Westlake Road, you're looking, majority is south of Butler. Just past, I think, your place there is when it really kind of switches.
Well, there's, I can think of 3 or 4 that are probably north of. Butler.
Yeah, there's a few, and then Sandy Beach, Poplar, Sandy Cove, all of those ones. So there's quite a few, I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. As far as current development ones, I'm trying to think of, that would be. There's one proposed for Sandy Beach, there's one on Sandy Beach, actually, that is.
But what we're saying then is people that are going to buy potentially in those areas that you just discussed. If the existing home is non-conforming to this. And somebody buys a home unknowingly and they want to tear it down and build a new home, a new structure, because that cottage is 100 years old. And they want to build the same size house. They can't do it because of this. I think that's
No,
restricted.
what they,
I mean,
there's a way around that.
If there's a way around it, I'm all for it, but
Well, the zoning board exists.
Yeah, that's why we have a zoning board.
Well, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't we been looking at these that if they leave the foundation, they can rebuild and it's not new development?
No,
No?
It's
No.
still considered a new home.
so
Okay.
for
but if it
development,
doesn't meet this, it'll never get to the planning board or the ordinance or the zoning board. It'll be shut down at town hall.
No, they can make applications.
Well, they'd have to go and make an application to go to the planning board or the ZBA.
So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, that's what we
Yeah,
have.
that's like
There's an existing structure
But-
on the land
But
that's non-conforming and somebody wants to buy it, tear it
But-
down and build a new home to the exact same size. I don't think we ought to be restricted
so
in that way.
do we just let every non-conforming thing exist because it exists now, or we try to get them into what would be to what we want?
Well, this here is just,
But I mean, it's, if you have a non-conforming house somewhere and you wanna tear it down, that's the time to make a change and make it come into conforming.
as far as I know, homes that are non-conforming right now, that are torn down, you can build to the same size home as long as you don't expand the footprint. I think this ought to say the same thing.
I think we've already taken a quick poll on that, and where there's 3 that would say,
It's totally, that's a different discussion than what we just talked about with regard to if the existing, when I need to repeat this, but right now, current code allows a person, regardless of where they're at, if they have a non-conforming structure, as long as they don't expand that footprint, they can build to the same size.
so at some time, do we wanna go from non-conforming to conforming? That's the question.
No, I'm saying. make
No,
it
that is the question.
The question is,
If there's a
why don't we make this
non-conforming
consistent?
building, it's gonna get torn down, so you're gonna start over, clean slate.
Yep.
Do we want it to conform to the existing rules? You say no, I say yes.
I say we shouldn't be punitive and we shouldn't be
We're
restrictive.
not being punitive. You don't have to tear it
Moving to our
down.
community and spending money.
You don't have to tear it down.
How often do you see this come to you, Chuck? I mean, how many of these do you see?
Well, like I said, half dozen maybe, in the last.
But it go to the ZBA first.
Yeah, so there, you know, so there is. that mechanism.
ZBA sees it.
Yeah.
Not if it's
If
not
they stay
conforming
within,
structure.
you know, below the lot coverage and building coverage, they don't get the ZBA. If they
Right.
do go over the lot coverage, building coverage with their new home, then they would get a ZBA, then they come to us for site plan. I think John's hitch is that if you have a non-conforming lot with lot coverage, say it's 30%, which is non-conforming. And you tear down that house along the lake. Now it's being calculated based just on the area of that lot on the lakeside.
Right.
That lot coverage could now be 65%. And the increase in the variance of the non-conformity is, you know, great.
Much larger, yes.
The new regs. So if we can some way address that kind of situation,
Yes.
because what you're saying is knock down a house, want to build another one the same size, but now the area upon which the lot coverage is calculated
It's
is
different.
much smaller,
Yes,
and therefore the higher percentage of lot coverage. You
exactly.
understand what I'm saying, Chris?
You might.
I absolutely understand.
So if we
I
can-
think this is a big jump in the town's lot coverage standards, a big change. It may be appropriate, it may not, but you know, it's a tiny little section of code that I wrote, but I think it has a bigger impact than a tiny little section of code. We've got lot coverage standards that have been, that were seriously contemplated and put in place. And I don't recall if they contemplated whether or not specifically to use the upland portion of a lot in the coverage calculation. But I think it requires some consideration and thinking through all these potential outcomes and a decision by the town board and first by this committee, whether that's what we intend or whether, you know, do we want to put a relief valve of, you know, you can tear down, rebuild. You know, I think you should put sort of outcome test it, see what this will result in, and if that's your intended result.
Isn't the ZBA our relief valve?
Yes.
Most of the people
Yes.
out there, Tom.
Well,
But their
John,
choice.
in all fairness, somebody that buys a lot on the lake with or without the intention of knocking it down when it's in this situation, probably should do the research, and if they're prosperous enough to afford a lake lot, and with the design, they really ought to look at what the zoning is, what the code is, what the restrictions are.
I couldn't disagree with you more. I mean, how many people do you know that are gonna go and check ordinances and check codes and wouldn't even know where to
If I
find
was
it?
gonna toss
they were
down the
gonna do it.
kind of money for a lake lot, especially with the idea of knocking down a house, I'd do some research.
Yeah, if your intent is to buy a house and knock it down, and you're not following the people.
20 or 30 years ago, Tom. What about people that bought that house 40 years ago? Or they just donated it to somebody in their family? I mean, this is so restrictive. I'm okay with doing it on future developments, but when people have bought a home, maybe they kept it in their family for the last 30 or 40 years, and they decide, okay, maybe it was a little cottage and it didn't have a second floor and they want to add a second floor. As long as that footprint is the same, we're gonna go now and say, well, we created this law in 2024 that said that you can no longer do this to your house. It's just, how is that fair and reasonable? It's restrictive. If anything, it's,
But again, you've been on the zoning board, why can't they just go to the zoning board and plead their case?
because it wouldn't get that far.
Why not?
Why would you get that? Why not?
Not get that far. I would never.
It goes all the time.
She would write an opinion and they can appeal it to the zoning board of
Right.
appeals.
That's
That's
zoning
what
board
happened.
for.
And it happens every time they build on Fallbrook.
Let me
Right.
explain something about how it works in our office. When someone comes in with an application for a project that they want to build in the town, we go over with the town code, we go over their plans, where it meets code, where it might not. I say, look, this doesn't look like this is gonna meet code. You have options. You can change your plans to meet the code. Here's some things you could do, or you can seek an appeal to the zoning board. That's why they exist. You can request a variance. I never make promises. I always explain it's up to the zoning board, but it's always an option. I never tell them you can't do this.
And let me tell you how the zoning board works. When a zoning board sees an ordinance like this, it's black and white. There's no considering an alternative, because the only time it's considered an alternative is when it's an extenuating circumstance. They're gonna say, this is not extenuating, it's black and white.
The zoning
I
board
would
grants most of the variances that come in front of them.
Sarah,
That's
I've been on the zoning
accurate.
board for how long? 5
Do
years,
you want
7 years?
statistics?
And I gotta tell you, if this came before the zoning board, it would be shut down. Your house would be shut
What
down.
they're going to the zoning board for would be more lot coverage than what they're allowed. If they're wanting 35% and only 30 is allowed.
I gotta
They're
tell you,
asking for a 5% variance or
the
whatever.
zoning board grants a couple of percent. They're not gonna consider something as egregious as this.
John, I don't think you can
Don't
speak
know
for the
how
zoning board. I
egregious
think
it
you have to
is
say,
until the
that we
application
have the
is there.
zoning board for a reason, and it's their job to look at individual things as they come across.
I sit on the zoning.
I
board.
get it, but you're not
7
sitting
years.
on the zoning board now, so you're projecting your thoughts on the zoning board. Let's
I know
let
what
the
they
zoning
do.
board run their own thing.
I know what they do. You know, you're letting personality get in the way of process and what's restrictive and not restrictive. Why in the world would we go and take somebody that might have owned the house for 30 years in the family? And all of a sudden now we tell them, you know what, you've owned this house for 30 years, but you can't tear it down and build a new one because we have
It's
an
not
ordinance that says
personal.
you're not.
It's not personal, I think we have
No, I mean
non-conforming
personal
and
between
conforming.
Dave and I, not personal here as far as this goes.
I mean, this law is not about a person or their history
I
or what
understand
they
what
want
it's
to
about,
do.
Sarah.
It's about,
I don't need to be
protecting-
educated in that regard or lectured in that regard, okay?
You
I
can
understand. I read it in
speak.
black and white. I'm a very educated person and I understand what it says. What,
Okay, so let's move on, we're just going circular on this, is there any other language in there that would need to be corrected?
I have a comment.
Okay,
What we proposed originally was the town of forums law, considering the bisected lots. And one of the things that got left out of Chris's draft was, it was, I believe, 50% on the lot size. Let me see.
50% coverage.
And then overall, it still had to meet the maximum setback. So that is what we proposed, and it changed in business. That really helped us accomplish.
And so help me out, so that makes it less,
Restrict.
that would make
That
it
would
less
be
restrictive.
Less restrictive than Chris's. Because Chris's said the maximum on the lot size was whatever was set by the town.
yeah, the way it would just fall on the lot calculations in the RLD based on the size of the lot, which it changes between, 10,000 to whatever,
Yeah,
we've got
yeah.
those little ranges built in.
There's.
increments.
Yes.
I mean, as I look at it, I would rather see it less restrictive like that. I mean, I get wanting to bring people in, but I also get the idea that if you have a house with a foot, as we look at, if we keep that word new in, like new lots or new homes, keeping the house, I honestly have no problem keeping a house on the same footprint. If it's already been there, it's already been established, that's what the environment surrounding has done that. It's the same thoughts that I have about, the issues that we're running into with form-based code with people coming in. If you touch a certain amount, you gotta blow out, do the whole building and start out, basically bring the whole thing into compliance. That poses challenges for me, so I'm more comfortable with keeping it. I do like that 50% allotment better, but I'm more
Maybe
comfortable.
50% is a compromise between.
Can we run numbers and see, can we run calculations and see how many we're gonna hit with this? Do we have any numbers to back up the decision?
I
framework with GIS. My only thing is with the building footprint. I think that would take some rewriting. Right, cause we're dealing with lot coverage.
Right, yeah,
So if you tear down the house in one location, and you can move it to another, then you would still be under that pre-existing non-conforming for the lot
Mhm.
coverage. So I think it would take some good nailer work, I'll say.
Wordsmithing, because if you
So-
say building footprint, it might let people, it would be like literally, well, that's where the footprint is, you can't move it. So within. I mean, again, because it's been, most of these places have been there, 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's not a big hangup for me to allow that same.
Yeah.
Trend somewhere.
Just to. And I, not to say one way or the other, but to bring it back to what the guiding document on making the decision is, which is the comprehensive plan. So to go into there and look at what the town's comprehensive plan for protection of the lake is. To help make that decision, if it's to enhance the protection, so if something's not conform, ends up being non-conforming, so you're basically decreasing the footprint through a rebuild, then you're enhancing the protection potentially, because you're now decreasing stormwater. If it's to leave it, as where it's at, I mean, it still kind of fits into the current comprehensive plan of protecting the lake, because you're not increasing the footprint, but you're just keeping it the same. So I just to bring that thought into the conversation is to look at the comprehensive plan and determine where it's at and whether, because again, remember that the lake is, like 70,000 people provides drinking water to. So are you looking at enhancing the protection of the lake as years go on, decades go on? Do we need to look at doing more for the protection, or are we good with what is currently existing at protecting the lake and allowing things to stay the same, but for future building to decrease that footprint? So just some thought process to bring into the conversation. Because I look at the comprehensive plan as a guiding document, and that's what decisions should be based off.
And just in harmony with what you're saying, Jared, if we said that existing structures, if it's teared down, cannot be expanded in size, I'd be comfortable with this. Let people build what is already existing in size.
Could we add in, because it's the bisecting lots are the big sticky wicket. That's, if you include all of it, then you're gonna shrink. What? Is there a way to incorporate improvements on the upper side to mitigate, to allow some of that wiggle room on the lower side, and just to open that up and say, well, if you're able to provide some stormwater relief on the upper side or do some other improvements. I'm just throwing,
I
just popped into my head, I'm just throwing it out there, seeing if it sticks.
I'd say no. I know this has been a goal of staff in my position previously, but the problem that we're seeing with those stormwater on the private side is they don't get maintained.
Mhm.
Rain gardens were a big push for a while. They get filled in. Dry wells, they don't get vacuumed out.
Permeable pavement gets sealed.
Yep, so you put salt on a permeable pavement, it's done forever. So our big thing and our big push, working with planning board, ECB and everyone else, is just straight infiltration, leave it virgin ground. So.
Fair. Well, you shut me down, Vince. Anyway.
Sorry.
Does it,
I'll take it.
I have a question, does this change what can be done in negative or positive way, what can be done on the other side of the lot? That if it's splitting? And so how does that affect the other side of the lot, I guess is my
There's
question.
still the coverage
Lot coverage rules.
max.
On both sides.
So
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm getting, so the
Yes.
other side, then they still can only do anything based on just that portion of the lot or the full.
That would be the question, is if you're dividing it, are you now reducing
Because
the
this-
maximum coverage for each,
Yeah.
and you calculate it individually, or just the lakeside gets its calculation separately, but the rest of it gets the whole thing. I found the
Yeah.
law that you mentioned, Kim, what you sent, I looked through and I found it. There was the original verbiage that said where lots are bisected by blah, blah, blah. The lakefront portion of the lot shall have maximum lot coverage of 50%. That's the Gorham code. It also said further down, the total lot coverage shall not exceed 25%. Like for the
So that was.
entire, so
Yeah.
say it's a 20-acre parcel and 0.25 or whatever is the lake and the rest is on the other side of the road. For that whole parcel, it would be 25%. But the ECB's mock-up was saying, do we do that 25% or do we use maximum as specified by the zoning district for the entire parcel also? So that's, yeah, you gotta.
Because I mean, the way my thought is it doesn't address it, is that only the lakeside, you'd have to use just the lakeside portion, but now. To build, they could do something on the other side and use the entire lot. Coverage.
I guess without specifying, that's probably what we would do.
Mhm.
We would just.
So I guess that's my
Still-
question, so does
Still a
that,
single
does
lot.
that defeat any purpose that you guys are trying to accomplish with the smaller size, by now they're able to just. Do something on the other side that makes it much bigger, that creates more stormwater runoff. So, does that just?
But it would have to adhere to all the same criteria, you know what I mean, non-permeable stuff on either, no matter what side it's on. I think we're
Except that
trying
a
to-
lot of these lots, the uphill side ends up going into a different zoning district. They end up in RR3 or R120, you know, on the uphill or I'm talking about mostly on the Westlake Road section.
But is that far enough away from the lake that the environmental impact of that is different than if it's in the RLD?
It's farther away. the
Right.
impact is lower.
Right, that's what but
But I don't have the map in front of me.
Right.
I don't know how many parcels where that side is all in RLD. A lot of them, it's like the front portion. And so when they're in the RLD, they have to conform with it.
Right.
If they are building like a really long driveway up the hill and they're putting their house where the lot is in R130, for example, that portion has to comply with.
but being that distance from the lake, the environmental impact should be significantly
I
less.
mean, that's where we are.
Right.
Anyway, but so that's what Gorham did, which is what Kim was saying, is this new proposal didn't address that stuff.
Well, I'm open to 50%, but I mean, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of coverage on a lot. And some of them are small. But I certainly would. My vote would be that would be okay. Not ideal.
Well, if this thought of, building gets knocked down, as long as you don't exceed that existing footprint. I mean, versus 50%, not exceeding the existing footprint might be a better compromise than going to 50%.
So they could expand more. I mean, the
Well, I
plan
mean,
would
you
be
would, they'd be able to knock it down and, the one that's going up near the schoolhouse.
So
That's going on the same size footprint, so.
for any RLD, if you have a lot that's less than 10,000 square feet, your lot coverage can be 40%. So for the really small ones, it's at 40%. If this law goes with what the ECB had suggested
the increase.
with the 50%, then those small lots that have land on the other side of the road would be allowed to go up 10% higher than if you're talking about a small lot that doesn't have anything on the other side of the road. So the way Gorham has it is they're still given some leeway considering what they've got on the other side of the road. It's larger lots like between 10 and 20,000 square feet, and we're just talking about RLD lots in general. Their lot coverage is 30%, and for lots that are larger than 20,000 square feet, their lot coverage is 25%. So if you've got more than 20,000 square feet on a lot bisected by a road in the RLD, Right now, your lot coverage on your whole parcel is 25%. But with the law, if it's the way ECB proposed it, they'd be allowed 50% on their lakeside portion. With the whole lot not being allowed to go over 25%, which it is already, so. I don't know, maybe some discussion on what Warren had and what ECB originally proposed versus what this current version is, which ones are,
Have we talked, do we know how it's working in Gorham?
I can ask.
That would help too if we had some.
Well, this does not have that 50%.
No, it doesn't.
No, this,
No,
what's in
the-
front of us is not that.
Forward you what.
It's up there
The
as well.
ECB, oh, yeah, it's that.
Yeah.
If, John, if somebody were to tear down leaf foundation and then have to build smaller, I'd imagine then it would also make them have to tear out part of that foundation and redo it, or you have to pull out the whole thing.
Well, probably full up over the
Wouldn't be as.
We had one try, it didn't work out so well.
Generally, it's not.
No.
So it's a lot more difficult to try to reduce the house size on an existing
Yeah.
foundation, so it would require
All
pulling
new.
out the entire foundation.
And more disturbance in the lake area than if they were just a.
Yeah, and my concern is. I don't care if we use 40 or 50%, if it's a new build, but if it's replacing an existing house, I believe they ought to be restricted to the size of the existing non-conforming structure. As far as a new build on the lakeside, you put 40, 50%, whatever you want, that's inconsequential.
Either way, this doesn't conform what you just said,
It
so
does
it's
not.
just gotta go back. I mean, it's either that or we make some changes here now and just move ahead, I think.
So I'm talking to Chris about this later on today. So what are the proposed changes to this?
Well, that you allow them to tear down, and rebuild on the same footprint, essentially, that's what it comes down to.
Not to exceed existing square footage,
Yeah, that could be-
because then if they were to move it, I mean, ideally the same footprint and same. I mean, I guess unless you're too
Well,
close to a
these
stream
smaller
bed
lots.
or some of these other areas,
But we've got.
Well, like that
ordinances
one
that
that,
Protect us for that.
yeah,
One
unless they
that's
wanted to move it away from something that had big causing problems.
one that's going up, near the schoolhouse there. You can't move that. I mean, it's.
It's
It's
a
probably
state land
still
anyways.
The whole lot.
It is where it is.
There's a little piece on the other side, but.
Oh, they had sweaters.
How many of these have already been done? How many would come for planning department in the future?
I don't know if it's
Seems
gonna,
like there's not much left to turn there.
and I'm okay with this, not to exceed the existing square footage.
Yeah.
For a tear down rebuild, but
Square footage or footprint? Because those are two different.
I know,
things.
but the problem is if they wanted to move the location of their home. To mitigate an issue, say there was a stream, maybe when it was built, it was too close to a stream or it was too close to something causing problems. We want to be able to allow them to, if they can, to move and mitigate that, I would think.
Is that development
Yeah.
or not, or ZBA?
As long as it didn't exceed.
I mean, that would
existing-
hit,
It would.
so like there's one I can think of that would
Yeah.
hit that. That actually is a perfect example for all of this. The house is 2 feet from the stream bed, I mean. Yeah, if they wanted to move it, I would just recommend going to the ZBA.
Right.
Kevin's office, my office, we'd be the first ones to recommend it,
Right, so,
as opposed to putting it in the law.
okay,
Don't you think moving though the structure is more significant than just popping a new house on the?
if they can use the existing foundation.
Just depends on.
Well, I don't think you can say.
They might not be able to.
Yeah.
Might not.
Meaning more.
Yeah.
I think you have to say that.
I
same
wouldn't build,
thing.
rebuild, I wouldn't
No,
rebuild the same
You're gonna
building.
wanna tear that, whatever's out there and start over.
And I'm just asking questions to
Yeah.
make sure, to
Yes.
alleviate unintended consequences.
Mhm.
But I just didn't know if moving something would then be more significant to fall into that, well, if you're gonna move it from where it is, now you're disturbing more ground, so now you do need to conform to the lot size rather than just building
Is
where
that
it
a-
exists.
Is that a planning board, zoning board issue versus this law issue?
I don't think it's really that much, like, we're not really too concerned about the overall disturbance as we are the infiltration and not permeable surface square footage. The disturbance, you're gonna get that no matter what,
Where they put it.
you drive a track machine across the lawn, that's disturbance, depending on the time of the year, so you're gonna have that, I think that's just kind of more of a planning board, when it's getting reviewed, would have to look at. And
So if
planning
I,
department.
And I was just
looking at
talking
it,
as
yeah,
far as
issue.
if you're gonna make an exception on if the new house already exists.
so I come in, I buy a house. I wanna tear it down, it's 4,000 square feet. I come in, I say, I just wanna rebuild it, I wanna tear down, and rebuild. I would go to the plant, I would go to the development office where I might, let's say I'm 2 feet from a stream, but I have room to move further away. That would be a discussion that could be, would that be a recommendation that you would make and say, you might wanna consider?
Current town code, if you have something today, like a house too close to a stream, and you come in and you propose to build a new house and you're gonna be farther away from the stream, but you're still not able to meet that 100-foot buffer, you would not need to go to the zoning board because you're reducing the nonconformity.
Okay,
You're making it better than it was before. So you wouldn't need to ask for a variance to do that, even though you don't meet code, because before you were 2 feet from the stream and you're proposing to be 25 feet from the stream.
it's an improvement.
So we're saying our code says that right now. You
Yeah.
don't need to ask, you don't need to get a variance for that, even though you still don't meet code because you're making it better. If you wanted to go closer to the stream,
That, yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Current
What if-
code, if you don't change it, you're also okay.
Okay.
But
What
we
if
look at
this
it
one
variance,
needed a
we look at it piece by piece,
Yes.
not as a whole.
Which is,
But for this new section of code, you would need a variance because you're moving the footprint.
You
That's what you'd
would
be
need
needing
a
to.
variance if you don't need the maximum building coverage percentage or maximum lot coverage. It doesn't address any other issue.
But with the changes that they're proposing. That's what they're talking about.
I guess it just depends how it's
Yeah.
worded.
Then you would need a variance for moving the structure off of the existing square footage, existing footprint, excuse me.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So yeah, you wouldn't need a
Why
variance
would you?
for the stream setback, you would need a variance for this section of ordinance.
I wouldn't think that we would want to take every opportunity if something is not conforming with a stream or some other, or something that would have an environmental impact on the lake to move that as far away as possible, but whether it conformed or not, but you know, to move the foundation away from that stream as far as possible on the lot.
I don't understand the moving the footprint. We don't have any current laws that have to do with
No.
whether or not you build on the footprint. It's about the size of the house and the setbacks. That's why people propose in the footprint, because then they wouldn't change anything that they had before, but then we don't have anything that says whether or not you can move, you know?
But that's the issue with this one, right? So.
Right,
because
but
it
I don't
just
think we
deals
should
with lot
create
coverage.
that. That's just adding more
No, but if
complication.
I have lot coverage and I already have 40%, I'm gonna do what Sandy Beach just did. You see what I'm saying with Venezia's project? I'm gonna move the house and now I'm gonna build it here. And I'm still gonna use that same lot coverage that I have. But that's an issue because now you're moving it elsewhere.
And it's non-conforming lot coverage.
Also, I can take my square footage for my patio, I can take my lot coverage for all of that and I can put it in. Because
I
this one
guess
just deals with lot.
I mean, we would just be looking,
He's creating-
does it meet code or not? You know, we look at it as a brand new, we don't look at it. like,
Yeah, but.
You move your house, okay, what's your setbacks? Does it meet it?
Right.
so rather than lot coverage, can we just focus on square footage of the home then? Maybe the issue is not have the footprint, not have existing footprint in there, but not to exceed existing square footage of the primary residence or living. I don't know, I'm just throwing out.
That's just my only thing with this one, just dictating lot coverage. Is
And
that-
building coverage.
Right,
But the current one only says lot coverage. You know what I'm saying? I get that it, yes, by default, but
Current one?
the proposed, the Chris,
No, it says building coverage and lot coverage.
sorry. I pulled it away like 10 minutes ago.
Hmm.
So like to go through and I'm thinking of one where I know the homeowner would go through and they would remove every single patio. Tear down the house and build a house that's twice as big.
Because now it includes
Have
all
the same
sitting
lot.
space.
Yeah. But it still has the same lot coverage, it still meets building coverage or, you know. That's my only concern.
But that's how we should do it anyway, for any house, we just calculate it.
Dave, you said, you're gonna be talking with Chris about this,
Yes.
maybe it should be a little bit longer discussion then. With Chris, based on all.
Yeah,
Right.
see where he is.
This isn't ready to go.
No, it's not ready to go, I
I
agree.
think Chris realized in the discussion. that-
He had to get off, right, yeah.
Well,
That's why they do the average goodbye.
That's why he left.
Out of here.
He saw that he,
So,
you
what-
did
what I-
wrong.
What I'm
He missed
asking
the mark.
for
Goodbye.
is,
Still out of here.
what additional verbiage do you wanna see in there? Just, not how it needs to look, but I have down same footprint. Is that what we're kind of agreeing to?
4 square
Well, I
footage.
just heard Mike say that he was concerned that they might use the the lot coverage to increase the size of the building. And maybe what we say is that neither changes, neither lot coverage nor building coverage increases on an existing parcel.
I think
Does
that's fair.
that satisfy your concern?
Yeah, cause I mean, even the building coverage would take into account sheds, boathouses and everything else. That's my concern is,
Yeah.
I'm gonna tear down. You know, my whole lot is over here, I'm gonna tear down. A shed, my boathouse, and I'm gonna argue that I. need
Well,
all this
because you're looking at people who are trying to squeeze every
Every day.
angle that they can and every definition. And
Yeah.
all the semantics to get what their ultimate goal is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an argument to get one paver stone removed. Because they needed to put in a generator, they were gonna be over by a square foot, and I said, okay, you need to remove one paver stone, they said, but it's one. I know,
But
but remove one paver stone,
That's only one, yeah.
and then it was, where's the paver stone, cause I kinda wanna take that with me, cause I know I'm gonna get in my truck, and you're gonna put it right back. But, yeah,
So, not to exceed existing lot coverage and building coverage is what? Is kind of a coming to? But. Alright, so if we can go back, now that we've argued that thoroughly. Did, I was gonna extend the privilege of the floor, I know we have someone in here, sorry to drag you out through this last hour.
Very
but-
interested by this conversation.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, it's privilege of the floor, I'm working through the scenario now, so if we now have a privilege of the floor, would anyone like to have a privilege of the floor?
So I'm just here to kind of encourage this group, the ordinance committee, to help us have a kind of a fuel gauge on all your projects. You got a lot of them, man, right? And sometimes when you got a lot of them, you do a little on each, but you never get done. And that's what I feel, even this past conversation, it's kind of shaky like that. And I'm very interested in the lot size required for an ADU, that will accept an ADU. And I'm also a believer that, I think I talked about my personal case. We have our daughter out in Portland, Oregon, Beaverton, and we're trying to make plans for her. And if you have more than 2 acres, or you guys pick the numbers, I'm not gonna give you the numbers. But why does it has to be attached? I didn't think we're talking about granting quarters with ADUs. This is started 5 years ago around preserving so that the next generation can have a home. And so I just think it needs to have some thought, and I'm also interested in making sure that thought goes at a pretty good pace, because people are waiting for that answer.
I agree. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did anyone get a chance to look at the minutes from November 4th? Just a motion to approve?
So,
All in favor? Aye. Floodplain ordinance.
It's turning into a 4-letter word. Not only in my office, but my home.
FLOD.
My wife is here, sick of hearing me complain about it. We pulled it from the town board agenda for setting a public hearing because I'm still having arguments with DEC. To not elaborate too much, Chris is involved. We're working through it. Chris and I are in constant communication on this. DEC. It's kind of bringing me down. Basically, what they're saying is that it's too restrictive. It's more restrictive than what they would want, was their exact verbiage. To which I said, okay, but we just had a CAV audit in which you said that we weren't doing enough. So now you're telling us we're doing too much. I'm sorry, I live in I work in Canandaigua. You are in Albany. So we're dealing with it. We'll see what we can do. But yeah.
Work in progress.
It's a work in progress, if any new developments come up, it'll come here first and then over to the town board, but. We don't foresee anything happening this year, let's put it that way.
You think they'll make us step up, conform to what they want?
If they had their way, yeah. I don't foresee that happening. The one sticking point is. They're arguing over stuff that they say is in building code. I say it's not. And legally, they're not allowed to interpret building code because they're not code enforcement officers, they're not the Department of State. And when I got an interpretation from DOS, they still didn't accept it. So we're kind of just going in a circle now. So. I love state agencies.
I was gonna say, is there a potential end to this or?
There will be when the new flood maps come in and they go through their 90-day.
But we gotta wait.
And that'll be January 1, within 60 days post January 1. And after that, I'll be the first one to call FEMA. And just Kyle's going down there next week, so hopefully. He's got a list of questions for me that he's gonna ask, and hopefully we'll get some answers then, but worst case scenario. We'll figure it out.
So potentially March before you take action on this.
Probably February,
Yeah,
because either way, we have to update the local law when the
Right.
new maps come in. Well, I'm not gonna update the local law with something that we don't believe in. And so that's the stick. So we'll have some resolution.
okay. So bisected lots, I'll talk to Chris later and try to get some verbiage added in on that. Let him know kind of the discussion that went on. Fire code, or a fire alarm, I'm sorry.
I don't know why that's there.
I don't know why that's
I
there
didn't put
either.
anything there.
Yeah.
It's going to the town board to set a public hearing.
Right, it's already got a public hearing, yeah,
So,
yeah.
gotcha.
I thought there was maybe something I didn't know about. 900 square foot garages in the RLD.
That on the lakeside?
I guess it could be.
Why do you got, why do you go there, Terry?
What's the lot coverage area of the garage, so.
900 square feet.
Yes.
Count the overhangs on the roof.
So there's no discussion on that, then.
Now, I'll open a discussion on it. We have allowed every zoning area in the town now to have in excess of 900 square foot detached garages, right? But yet we said the RLD could not. And my question was, why make an exception in the RLD? Why do they have to be attached in the RLD?
I'm wide open.
Limited to.
Yeah.
Or limited to, yeah,
You'll need.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's-
I think when Murphy and I talked about this, the question just comes down to, it would just fall under lot coverage and building coverage. would be the only limits if you removed the 900 square foot limit.
I don't think anyone raised the question. I know we did in our office and it was, okay, we got this section of code that we were battled on and we lost. Let's quickly go through and change that. And we'll look at everything else.
So we changed it in every other zoning area but the RLD, and when it came to the board, it came to the board that way. And I raised a question at that time, why not including that in the RLD also? And I don't know if I ever got an answer then, and I don't know if I'm getting an answer now. I mean, I think if it's gonna be allowed in every other zoning area, it should be allowed in the RLD too, if the person has the ability to do that.
And that's what Sarah was saying, when me and her talked, it was, that's fine. Cause you still have a lot coverage, you still have the building
Right.
coverage.
Right,
You have those limitations built into play. The only ones that I think this was really the reason was to dig in here and go through. The reason why, actually, now that I think about it, well, we didn't touch this one with that, is because we've been touching way too many sections. And I think we just said, yeah, it's good. So. Because it was in there as the definition was changed. I don't think it was ever supposed to be limited to 900 square feet outside of the RLD when that was written. Because the only time that it calls out that it's limited is within the RLD section by definition. And so I think this one would just be very simply remove that last part of 900 square foot. Now they have to comply with lot coverage and building coverage and everything else, and they're good. So.
Agreed.
yeah, I don't have a problem with that either.
Like I said, I think when we did the initial, the first one, it was. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. So. That's fine.
Terry, where are you on this?
Right.
Well, that was easy. See, Greg, we're moving stuff right along like as fast as we
Can we just get clarification on one thing from a staff perspective? Are we still good with keeping the height restriction? Just if we're gonna touch the section, I wanna. So the whole one is one detached private garage no taller than 16 feet. Are we okay with that still?
I think that's really more important than 100 square feet.
I just, if we're gonna touch the section, we wanna make sure we're good on the whole thing.
If somebody wants to go higher than 16 feet, they can go to the zoning board, right?
Yeah.
So let it rip.
Yeah.
Any discussion from the form-based code committee?
Wait, didn't we sent this? The Department of State in October. How do we undo this?
What are we gonna do?
This local law 10 of 24 about the garages being 900 square feet.
We're amending it.
You just gotta do another local law.
We're gonna do a local law, right?
It's gotta be a
It's just
citizen.
amending it.
Gotta undo it.
No, not necessarily undoing what we already did, just it's another amendment.
Each amendment to a local law has to just be another local law that overrides the previous.
Can't just fix it.
You should see the amount. of
I just wanna know
desktops.
why we sent it off to them if we haven't had a discussion.
Because we had a discussion on the law that was passed. This is a new piece of it.
Okay, never mind.
It's just another change to the same section of code, but it does something different than the other change.
So really, all we're gonna do is, if I understand it correctly, and I'll talk to Nadler about this as well, is remove 900 square foot, nothing else, correct?
There may be some other things just to double check. Look at,
Okay,
We're gonna remove the exception in the RLD.
we
right,
might need to reword the RLD section to clarify lot coverage and building coverage, something of that sort.
The goal, the resulting goal is that in the RLD, you're not limited to a 900 square foot detached garage. You're just limited based on building coverage and lot coverage percent. That's the goal, right? So what the language has to be to do that is what.
Whatever
help
goal,
us
yeah.
figure.
Right.
Sometimes there's other sections of code that are implicated, so he helps make sure we found it all.
form-based code committee, do you guys have any?
We didn't have any recent meetings. We have discussion with staffs and everyone will get together and we'll talk. When we met last, afterwards, she decided to take a nice fun vacation. And then I
It has
shared.
been planned. For like a year.
A year. So, she provided some input, and then we'll get together and hash that out, but that's been on the back burner for a couple weeks with, moving and with other things going on. So now we'll be ready to jump back into that and have a meeting set.
Sounds good. All right, we're leaving here at 11 and we're gonna talk about ADUs.
What?
Leaving at 11.
This meeting's over at 11 and we're gonna start the discussion on ADUs right now.
That's still 40 minutes away.
Maximum of 11. My personal opinion is kind of what Greg was saying, is that I mean, I think we need to establish what they're gonna look like, but I don't think they need to be attached. If you have enough property and you meet the other lot coverage criteria
And setbacks.
and setbacks, all the other building requirements, I personally don't have a.
Why was it originally established that there had to be some physical connection?
I think it's the whole granny thing, you're taking care of your mother, your grandmother.
Oh, no, I mean, why does our code say it has to be attached?
Cause we don't allow 2 single-family homes on one lot.
Okay,
Sir, could you speak up just a little bit?
Our town code doesn't allow you to have 2 single-family homes on one tax map parcel. So in order to have the ADUs that we currently have, I guess, I mean, I don't know, I wasn't there at the time, but it seems like having it attached is not, I don't know, I mean, you
It's
still
not
have
two
to.
separate
You
things,
still, no, they are. They are
I mean,
two
if they're
separate
attached.
things, but they're attached and it still has the appearance of a single-family home that doesn't look like a duplex.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of the risk.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of what?
The risk. So you, with 2 structures, you're gonna have 2 utility connections for everything. You're
You
gonna
don't have
have,
to.
you don't have to, but you could. Okay,
When you say risks, life safety risks or
no, the risk is inherent to the town in the sense of you're gonna have 2 structures on a lot that can be completely independent, even though they were developed underneath an ADU. So this has been a big talk amongst code officials in the county, because everyone's looking at it.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we keep going back to is, I built a house for my father and mother, that's great, that's what it's used for. I sell that house in 10 years, that's now a rented space. That's a rental, tenants and leasing, and then we have more complaints on the code side, which that's a discussion for a different day. Then the worst case nuclear scenario, and I hate to say it, code officers, this is how we think, is you sell off that building, now you wanna subdivide that lot in 30 years. And now you're creating small lots and saying, well, it's a structure, can I get a variance for subdivision or a waiver? And create 2 lots that don't conform to zoning in any respect, and now you have 2 completely separate off of private road.
Well, in order to subdivide it, don't we have to meet?
Yeah.
Whatever the underlying, zoning district is, or I would think.
Has to, but we see it, waivers and variances and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, that is an unintended
And
consequence.
they would go through and to say to the zoning board or the planning board, no, you gotta tear that building down if you wanna do that. It's a big ask. It's been done before, but that's our nuclear option, is that it's 30 years from now, 40 years from now. Can the planning board or zoning board look at a property owner and say, no, you can't do that, you need to tear that building down,
Or you just can't subdivide.
or you just
Right.
can't subdivide.
or in Greg's situation where you would end up, and it's not your fault, but you would have more dwellings on a, what do we call it, a private driveway, which you're trying to get away from. And the guy that buys your ADU in 20 years is gonna want the town to plow that driveway. That's an unintended consequence, perhaps.
And that's, I'm all for the concept of the ADUs, it's just, these are the things that when the code officials and neighboring municipalities that we're all trying to think of before, no offense, it gets to the words that. Cause we all think nuclear, we're like, okay, what really are the biggest issues? Those are the 2, getting sold and leased out as a second dwelling unit, completely independent. And that creates more issues than we've got time for. And then the 30, 40, 50 years of now you have a structure completely independent, wanting to get subdivided. And you've just got a whole bunch of.
Well, I don't think you have to look out 30 or 40 years, you look out a year, somebody does that with that intent.
With the intent, built it with that intent,
Yeah.
right?
We go out 30 years.
How can you sort, you don't
I'm
know
not
what
gonna
somebody's
be-
thinking.
We're gonna have years left in retirement.
We
but-
can.
You could still be here 30 years. from
I
now.
could, yeah, I'm gonna have to be. But we look at that because that's what we deal with, is trying to figure out intent of stuff from even 5 years ago and no one's here. You know, the intent is still there, but in 30 years it's not.
But we do have a safety net in coding. If somebody wanted to subdivide, they still have to comply with existing
With
codes.
existing.
So you want separate utilities and want separate
Correct.
setbacks and all that would have to be compliant
But
with.
how often do we see variances and waivers get granted for those?
Well, we gotta be smarter on
I agree,
If-
but we
if
can't
it- if
tell the
it's
zoning board or planning
self-imposed-
board how to,
that. We're not supposed to grant it.
but we can't.
If you have all separate service and everything, then almost set it up to make it easier to
100%.
build this thing and then,
But if they got a big
That's
enough
all right,
lot,
you know,
we care.
100%.
yeah.
And that's the issue, once you get into the septic and everything else, I mean, that just creates more.
Yeah.
It's a Russian nesting now, the more that we dug into it, the more issues we started to find. Not so much issues, but areas of concern. I
But
mean, now
with
we're
the-
reporting 2 septic systems on a property and trying to keep track of
But they
inspections.
could do that anyway, with the direction we're going now, with no minimum size, someone could subdivide their lot. They have a vacant lot, and they sell it, and someone comes in and builds a small house on it, same result. We allow that now,
But the lot size conforms.
But it would have to be conforming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
unless
why
they
we have
ask
zoning.
for a waiver from the planning board,
Well, there's
or a
nothing,
variance from the zoning
But,
board.
but I think that's, I mean, I know we can't tell the zoning board or planning board what to do, but we've got to maybe instill in them. That might not be the desired effect, it would not be for me.
but
Well, I'm
there's nothing
saying
stopping
we
a
could do
person
that
now
now.
from,
Yeah,
if they have that much land,
Yeah,
from
what's
just
the difference?
subdividing and selling it
yeah,
off.
Right.
that's my
Someone builds
point.
a house on it, well,
There,
what's the difference?
yeah, no, yeah, it's not different.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I think it makes it a little easier, but someone could still do that today, especially,
They could, it's more of the structure being existing. And then you're dealing with the setbacks, especially with an ADU, because they're supposed to be relatively close distance for the utility aspect.
and there are some towns that are writing their ADU laws that are requiring it to be on the same utilities. And it has to be, yes, within a certain distance, and it can't be more than a certain size so that it's incidental to the primary, so there's different ways these are being written.
You do it as a special use permit,
I think that's,
I don't think
because
you
you could put
could,
all kinds of restrictions on it, special, you know.
yeah, you can.
I don't think you
Choose one.
legally could. So it still is a residential structure.
No, it's a special use in terms of its being.
But it's
It's not
not.
land use, it's still residential.
Underlying is still
A lot of different
different.
things here. Are we in agreement or not agreement about detached ADUs? It's something we want to pursue or just let it go?
I think you have to pursue.
I'm for pursuing.
Oh, yeah, I think. So.
Mhm.
Terry?
I'm retired, we got a lot to study.
Todd?
Pursue.
So I think we have an appetite on ordinance committee to pursue this, even with the given pitfalls, and we just have to navigate those carefully, so. Is this something that we want to throw at Nadler, or do we want to come up with some guidelines or some rails for him to stay inside of?
I think.
Or do you guys want to talk?
It's an existing
Is-
code.
Yeah.
Isn't there some model code
Yeah.
is from state of New York?
Yeah, and then
We
someone
discussed
was,
this when you were.
Let's not reinvent the wheel.
No, I totally.
and then
agree.
someone was
We never
saying,
drafted it.
well, because someone was saying that it was going to the state. The state never had any laws.
It's part of the.
It was part of the budget, but
It's part of the budget and the housing plan and the pro housing
The county.
community.
there was never actually any law
Yeah.
that's more than
We
just.
know.
The state giving, pushing initiative.
And the state.
Yeah, the governor just said you guys ought to do
We
it.
decided to pause the
Right.
conversation because we thought
No,
the state was gonna
Because it
come up
would
with
seem that maybe.
language regarding
ADUs.
Yeah,
that's what-
yeah.
Existing
And the state just said,
Should.
hey, we want you to.
Yeah, do we have, what do we have now? Do we have very many
Watching.
ADUs that are attached in the town?
That's okay. Yeah. So kind of what we were just talking about, Sarah and I, were that, what we're gonna do is
Yeah,
have
attached physically.
Mike and Sarah get together, we're gonna have them just kind of get some, try to find some examples. They'll email them out to us, different ideas and stuff, and we'll talk about, further discussions on as we go. Not having to ever look at any, draft on any laws or anything until we, put our own footprint on it, so,
Yeah, can I make one final comment?
yes.
When I talk about minimum lot size, I think that's really important to this conversation. Because I would not expect our home thoughts, the Morel subdivision, okay? And those are, I don't know what they are, half an acre or something in that neighborhood. I wouldn't expect them to ask for a separated product.
Neither would I mean, we would not, I personally would not want to see
There's
that.
gotta be an acreage number.
Right.
That needs to be,
Minimum lot size to have an ADU too. is what
an
we-
ADU separated from.
Yeah.
Well, it has to be whatever.
He-
the-
he had it.
Whatever.
You know, If it's AR
Zoning
two,
district.
the guy has at least 4 acres, you can chop in half.
Right.
Right. So maybe we're setting ourselves up for subdividing lots, you think we make it too big. But I think to Greg's point, I think we definitely wanna have it on a big enough lot size that it's not in a development like that. Detached.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because I would think right now, anything that's physically attached, separation between the two dwelling units isn't that much. So have an ADU, if you have 5 acres and it's AR2, you got a house here, you're gonna build another one. Does it have to be a space that would allow
For the setback.
for the setback
I
and
think we-
everything to, I mean, there's a lot.
That's a good point, I mean, if you're building an ADU for the purpose of elderly parents or
Yeah.
family coming in. You might not want it way away.
And the ADU is really, and one of the original thoughts was to build that space for aging
Right.
parents and all that, so aging parents don't wanna have to walk 2 acres to get
Right,
400 feet to get over to your house to get breakfast.
right.
Or think about the granny apartment that becomes a 0 lot line, separate dwelling somehow later.
No, that wouldn't be possible. I think.
Don't hold your breath, but I'll bet you that.
No, because
That might come.
Because if it's a single structure, then it's attached and. it
And then
can't be
if
subdivided.
somebody takes that ADU and tries to
It
create it into
becomes
something
townhouse.
else, and you deal with that at that point.
Had to be teared down.
I think when you try to create, if you try to deal with this with all those
Right.
thoughts,
Hmm?
then you're not kind of creating what you're looking to create.
We just have to put the skeleton of what we're
That'd be
talking
right.
about in and let it go from there. So. We made it in
We got 35 minutes.
much less time than I thought we were gonna come up with, but that's will be a fun topic to discuss next, so.
Don't forget
Anything
about-
else?
Don't forget about the request for the fuel gauge.
The fuel gauge.
Yeah, to figure out how much longer this will, not just ADUs, but also the other things that are going on. So we're always working on the things. that are
Oh, yeah.
At the need of the constituents.
I hear you. I try to push it as hard as I can, so. But sometimes we get caught up in stuff, but we'll keep on the fuel gauge.
What, I'm lost.
We
What's the
need to make
full
progress, we need to make progress. We
Measure
can't
your
keep
progress
talking
every
about-
quarter. Don't do it every month, every quarter.
Local laws they've passed this year.
I'm sorry, I can't hear
Do you know how many local laws
We
they've
just
passed?
fixed it anyway.
Yeah. Just not the right ones, right?
No, no, right.
Yeah. There's
So
not
the
that.
next meeting is January sixth, 9:00.
Previous administration.
I don't know, it'll probably be here, right?
January 6th is.
Right,
kind of,
in years of-
robust.
Yeah.
So get the motion to adjourn,
Takes a while.
So we'll-
So move.
second,
All right.
all in favor, thank you all.
Drink water.